Chapter 14. Mina Harker's Journal. 23rd September. Jonathan is better after a bad night. I'm so glad that he has plenty of work to do, for that keeps his mind off the terrible things. Oh, and I am rejoiced that now that he is not weighed down by the responsibilities of his new position. I knew he would be true to himself, and am now proud of how to see my Jonathan rising to the height of his advancement and keeping pace in all ways with the duties that come upon him. He will be away all day till late, for he said he could not come home at lunch. My housework is done, so I shall take his foreign journal and lock myself up in my room and read it. 24th September. I hadn't the heart to write last night. That terrible record of Jonathan's upset me so. Poor dear, how he must have suffered. Whether it be true or only imagination, I wonder if there's any truth in it at all. Did he get his brain fever, then write down those poor things? Or he had some cause for it all? I suppose I shall never know, for I dare not open the subject to him. And yet, that man we saw yesterday, he seemed quite certain of him. Poor fellow. I suppose it was the funeral that upset him and sent his mind back on some train of thought. He believes all of it himself. I remember how on our wedding day he said, "Unless some solemn duty comes upon me to go back to the bitter hours, awake or asleep, mad or sane." There seemed to be, as though through it all, some thread of continuity. That fearful Count was coming to London. If it should be, and he came to London with his teeming millions, there may be a solemn duty, and if it come, we must not shrink from it. I shall be prepared. I shall get my typewriter this very hour and begin transcribing. Then we shall be ready for other eyes if required. And if it be wanted, then perhaps, if I am ready, poor Jonathan may not be upset, for I can speak with him, and never let him be troubled or worried by it all. If ever Jonathan gets quite over this nervousness, he may very well tell me all of it, and I can ask him questions of things and find out and see how I may comfort him. Letter. Van Helsing to Mrs. Harker. 24th September. Confidence. My dear madam, I pray that you will pardon my writing, in that I am so far friend that I have sent to you sad news of Miss Lucy Westenra's death. By the kindness of Lord Godalming, I am empowered to read her papers and letters, for I am deeply concerned about certain matters vitally important. In them I find some letters from you, which show how great friends you were, and how you love her. Oh, Madam Mina, by that love I implore you help me. It is for others' good that I ask, to redress great wrong, and to live much in terrible troubles, for it may be great that you know. May it be that I see you? You can trust me. I am friend of Dr. John Seward and of Lord Godalming. That was Arthur of Miss Lucy. I must keep it private for the present from it all. I should come to Exeter to see you at once, if you will tell me I am privileged to come, and when and where. I implore your pardon, madam. I have read your letters to poor Lucy, and know how good you are, and how your husband suffers. So I may pray to you, if it may be, enlighten him not, lest it may harm. Again your pardon, and forgive me. Van Helsing. Telegram. Mrs. Harker to Van Helsing. 25th September. Come today by 10:15 train if you can catch it. Can see you any time you call. Wilhelmina Harker. Mina Harker's Journal. 25th September. I cannot help feeling terribly excited as the time draws near for the visit of Dr. Van Helsing, for somehow I expected it to throw some light upon Jonathan's sad experience, and as he attended poor Lucy in her last illness, he can tell me all about her. That is the reason of his coming. It's concerning Lucy and her sleepwalking, and not about Jonathan. And then I shall never know the real truth now. How silly I am. That awful journal gets hold of my imagination and tinges everything with something of its own color. Of course it's about Lucy. That habit came back to the poor dear, and that awful night on the cliff must have made her ill. I almost had forgotten in my own affairs how ill she was afterwards. She must have told her of her sleepwalking adventure on the cliffs, and I knew all about it. And now he wants me to tell of what he knows, so that he may understand. I hope I did right in not saying anything of it to Mrs. Westenra. I should never forgive myself if any act of mine, were it even a negative one, brought harm to poor dear Lucy. I hope, too, Dr. Van Helsing will not blame me. I have had not so much trouble and anxiety of late that I feel I cannot bear just as present. I suppose a cry does us more good at all times, clears the air as rain does. Perhaps it was reading the journal yesterday that upset me, and then Jonathan went away this morning to stay away from me for a whole day and night, the first time we've been parted since our marriage. I do hope the dear fellow will take care of himself, and that nothing will occur to upset him. It is 2:00, and the doctor will be here soon. I shall say nothing of Jonathan's journal unless he asks me. I am so glad that I have typewritten my own journal, so that in case he asks of Lucy, I can hand it to him. It will save me much questioning. Later. He is come and gone. Oh, what a strange meeting, and how it all makes my head whirl round. I feel like one in a dream. Can it all be possible, or even part of it? If I had not read Jonathan's journal first, I should not have accepted even a possibility. Poor dear Jonathan! How he must have suffered! Please the good God, all this may not upset him again. I shall try to save it from him, but it may be even consolation or even help to him, terrible though it may be and awful in its consequences. For it is certain that his eyes and ears and brain do not deceive him, and that it is all true. It may be that it is doubt which haunts him, that when the doubt is removed, no matter which, waking or dreaming, may prove true, he will be more satisfied and better able to bear the shock. Dr. Van Helsing must be a good man as well as a clever one, if he is Arthur's friend and Dr. Seward's, and if they brought him all the way from Holland to look after Lucy, I feel, having seen him, that he is good and kind and of noble nature. When he comes tomorrow, I shall ask him about Jonathan, and then, please God, all this sorrow and anxiety may lead to a good end. I used to think I would like to practice interviewing. Jonathan's friend on the Exeter News told me that memory was everything in such a work, that you must be able to put down exactly almost every word spoken, even if you might have to refine it somewhat afterwards. Here's a rare interview. I shall try to record it verbatim. It was 2:30 when the knock came. I took my courage domains and waited. In a few minutes, Mary opened the door and announced Dr. Van Helsing. I rose and bowed, and he came towards me, a man of medium weight, strong build, with his shoulders set back over a broad, deep chest, and a neck well balanced on the trunk as his head on a neck. The poise of the head strikes me as indicative of thought and power. The head is noble, well-sized, broad, and large behind the ears. The face, clean-shaven, shows a hard, square chin, a large, resolute, mobile mouth, a good-sized nose, rather straight, with very quick, sensitive nostrils that seem to broaden as the big, bushy brows came together and the mouth tightens. The forehead is broad and fine, rising almost straight, and then sloping back almost 2 bumps and ridges wide apart. Such a forehead that had reddish hair that can't possibly tumble over it, but falls naturally back and to the sides. Big, dark blue eyes are set wide apart, and are quick and tender or stern with the man's moods. He said to me, "Mrs. Harker, is it not?" I bowed absently. That was Miss Mina Murray. Again I assented. It is Mina Murray that I came to see, that was friend to that poor dear Lucy Westenra. Madam Mina, it is on that account of the debt I come. Sir, I said, you could have no better claim on me than you were a friend and helper to Lucy Westenra. And I held out my hand. He took it and said tenderly, "Oh, Madam Mina, I know that the friend of the poor Lucy girl must be good, and I have yet to learn." He finished his speech with a courtly bow. I asked him what it was that he wanted to see me about, so at once he began, "I have read your letters to Miss Lucy. Forgive me, but I had to begin to inquire somewhere, and there was none to ask. I know that you were with her in Whitby. She sometimes keeps a diary. You need not look surprised, Madam Mina. Was begun after you had left, and there was imitation of you. In that diary she traces by inference certain things to a sleepwalking in which she put down you saved her. In great perplexity I have come to you and ask out of your so much kindness to tell me all about it that you can remember." "I can tell you, I think, Dr. Van Helsing, all about it." "Ah, then you have good memory for facts, for details? It is not always so with young ladies." "No, doctor, but I wrote it all down at the time. I can show it to you if you like." "Oh, Madam Mina, I would be so grateful. You would do me much favor." I could not resist the temptation of mystifying him a bit. I suppose it's something of a taste of the original apple that remains still in our mouths, so I handed him the shorthand diary. He took it with a grateful bow and said, "May I read it?" "If you wish," I answered as demurely as I could. He opened it, and for an instant his face fell. Then he stood and bowed. "Oh, you so clever woman," he said. "I knew long that Mr. Jonathan was a man of much thankfulness. But see, his wife has all the good things. It will not have so much honored me and so much helped me as to me read it for me? Alas! I know not the shorthand." By the time my little joke was over, and I was almost ashamed, I took over the typewriter copy. I took the typewriting copy from my work basket and handed it to him. "Forgive me," I said. "I could not help it. But I have been thinking that it was of dear Lucy that you would wish to ask, and so that you might not have not time to wait, not on my account, but because I know your time must be precious. I have written it out on the typewriter for you." He took it, and his eyes glistened. "Oh, you are so good," he said. "And may I read it now? I may want to ask you some things while I read." "By all means," I said. "Read it over whilst I order lunch, and then you can ask me questions whilst we eat." He bowed and settled himself in a chair with his back to the light, and became absorbed in the papers, whilst I went out after lunch, chiefly in order that he might not be disturbed. When I came back, I found him walking hurriedly up and down the room, his face all ablaze with excitement. He rushed up to me and took both of my hands. "Oh, Madam Mina," he said, "how can I say what I owe to you? This paper is as sunshine. It opens the gates to me. I am dazed. I am dazzled with so much light, and yet clouds roll in behind light all the time. But you cannot comprehend. Oh, but I am grateful to you. You so clever woman, madam." He said this very solemnly. "If ever Abraham Van Helsing can do anything for you or yours, I trust you will let me know. It will be pleasure and delight if I may serve you as a friend. As a friend, with all I have ever learned, all I shall ever do be for you and those you love. There are darknesses in life, and there are lights. You are one of those lights. You will have happy life and good life, and your husband will be blessed in you." "But doctor, you praise me too much, and you do not know me." "Not know you? I, who am old and who have studied all my life men and women. I, who have made my speciality the brain and all that belongs to him and all that followed from him. And I have read your diary that you have so goodly written for me, and which breathes out truth in every line. I, who have read your so sweet letter to poor Lucy of her marriage, and your trust, now not know you? Oh, Madam Mina, good women tell all their lives, and by day and by hour and by minute, such things that angels can read. And we men who wish to know have in us something of angels' eyes. Your husband is noble nature, and you are noble too, for you trust, and trust cannot be where there is mean nature. And your husband, tell me of him. Is he quite well? Has the fever gone, and is he strong and hearty?" I saw here an opening to ask about Jonathan, so I said, "Oh, he's almost well recovered. But he's been greatly upset by Mr. Hawkins' death. He interrupted. Yes, I know. I've read your last 2 letters. I went on. I suppose this upset him, for when we were in town Thursday, he had a sort of shock. A shock? And after brain fever so soon? This is not good. What kind of shock was it? He thought he saw someone who he recalled something terrible, something which led to his brain fever. And here the whole thing seemed to overwhelm me in a rush. The pity for Jonathan, the horror which he experienced, the whole frightful mystery of his diary, and the fear that he had been brooding over me ever since, all of it came in a tumult. I suppose I was hysterical, for I threw myself on my knees and held my hands up to him and implored him to make my husband well again. He took my hands and raised me up, made me sit on the sofa, and sat beside him. He held my hand in his and said to me with, oh, so infinite sweetness, my life is a barren and lonely one, and so full of work that I have not much time for friendships. But since I have been summoned here by my friend Jonathan Seward, I have known so many good people, and seen such nobility, that I feel more than ever, and it has grown with my advancing years, the loneliness of my life. Believe me, then, that I have come here full of respect for you, and you have given me hope. Hope, not in what I am seeking of, but there is good women still left to make life good. Good women, whose lives and whose truths make good lessons for the children that are to be. I am glad that I may be here of some use to you, for if your husband suffer, he suffer within the range of my study and experience. I promise you that I will gladly do all for him that I can, all to make his life strong and manly, and your life a happy one. Now you must eat. You are overwrought and perhaps over-anxious. Husband Jonathan would not like to see you so pale, and he would not like to see where he love is good. Therefore, for his sake, you must eat and smile. And you told me all about Lucy, so we may not speak of it, lest it distress. I shall stay in Exeter tonight, for I want to think over much of what you have told me, and when I have thought, I will have you answer your questions if I may, and then, too, you will tell of husband Jonathan's troubles so far as you can, but not yet. We must eat now. Afterwards, you shall tell me all. After lunch, we went back to the drawing room, and he said to me, and now, tell me all about him. When he came to speaking about this greatly learned man, I began to fear that he would think me a weak fool, and Jonathan a madman. That journal is all so strange, and I hesitated to go on, but he was so sweet and kind, and he promised to help me, and I trusted him, so I said, Dr. Van Helsing, what I have to tell you is so queer that you must not laugh at me or my husband. I have been since yesterday in a sort of fever of doubt. You've been kind to me, and not think me foolish that I have ever half believed some of the strange things. He reassured me by his manner, as well as his words, when he said, Oh, my dear, if you only knew how strange is the matter regarding which I am here, then it is you who would laugh. I have learned not to think little of anyone's belief, no matter how strange it may be. I have tried to keep an open mind, and it is not the ordinary things of life that can close it, but the strange things, the extraordinary things, the things that make one doubt if they be mad or sane. Thank you, 1,000 times. You've taken a great weight off my mind. If you will let me, I shall give you a paper to read. It is long, but I have typewritten it out for you. It will tell you of my troubles and Jonathan's. It is a copy of his journal when abroad, and all that has happened. I dare not say any of it. You will read it for yourself and judge. And when I see you, perhaps you will be very kind and tell me what you think. I promise, he said as I gave him his papers. I shall in the morning, as soon as I can, come to see you and your husband if I may. Jonathan will be here 11:30, and you must come to lunch with us and see him then. You could catch the quick 3:34 train, which will leave you at Paddington before 8. He was surprised at my knowledge of trains offhand, but he doesn't know that I have made up all the trains from to and from Exeter, so that I may help Jonathan in case he is in a hurry. So he took his papers with him and went away, and I sit here thinking I don't know what. Letter by hand Van Helsing to Mrs. Harker, 25th September, 6 o'clock. My dear Madam Mina, I have read your husband's so wonderful diary. You may sleep without doubt. Strange and terrible as it is true. I will pledge my life on it. It may be worse for others, but for him and you there is no dread. He is a noble fellow, and let me tell you from experience of men that one would not do as he was doing going down that wall and in that room. Aye, going down a second time is not one to be injured in a permanence by shock. His brain and his heart are all right. This I swear. But before I have ever seen him, so be at rest. I shall have much to ask of him and other things. I am blessed that today I come to see you, for I have learned all at once so much that I am dazzled more now than ever, and I must think. Yours, the most faithful, Abraham Van Helsing. Letter, Mrs. Harker to Jonathan Van Helsing. My dear Dr. Van Helsing, 1,000 thank yous for your kind letter, which has taken a great weight off my mind. And yet, if it be true, what terrible things there are in the world, and what an awful thing if that man, that monster, be really in London. I fear to think, at this very moment, whilst writing, have had a wire from Jonathan, saying that he leaves by the 6:25 tonight from Lansdowne, and will be here at 10:18, so that I shall have no fear tonight. Will you, therefore, instead of lunching with us, please come by for breakfast at 8 o'clock, if this would not be too early for you? You can get away, if you are in a hurry, by the 10:30 train, which will bring you to Paddington by 2:35. Do not answer this, as I shall take it. If you do not hear it, you will come to breakfast. Believe me, your faithful and grateful friend, Mina Harker. Jonathan Harker's Journal, 26 September. I never thought to write in this diary again, but the time has come. When I got home last night, Mina had supper ready, and when we had supped, she told me of Van Helsing's visit, and of her having given him the 2 diaries copied out, and how anxious she must have been about me. She showed me to the doctor's letter, and that all that I wrote down was true. It seemed to have made a new man of me. It was the doubt of the reality that the whole thing that knocked me over. I felt impotent and in the dark and distrustful, but now I know. I am not afraid, even of the Count. He has succeeded, after all, then in his designs of getting to London, and it was he that I saw. He has gotten younger, but how? Van Helsing is the man to unmask him and hunt him out, if he has anything what Mina says. We sat late and talked it over, when Mina is dressing, and I shall call at the hotel in a few minutes and bring him over. He was, I think, surprised to see me. When I came into the room where he was and introduced myself, he took me by the shoulder and turned my face round to the light, and said after a sharp scrutiny, "But Madam Mina told me that you were ill, that you had a shock." It is so funny to hear my wife called Madam Mina by this kindly, strong-faced old man. I smiled and laughed. I was ill. I had a great shock, but you have cured me already. And how? By your letter to Mina last night. I was in doubt, and everything took a hue of unreality, but I did not know what to trust, even the evidence of my own senses. Not knowing what to trust, I did not know what to do, and only had to keep on working in the hitherto I've been given the groove of my life. The groove ceased to avail me, and I mistrusted myself. Doctor, you do not know what it is to doubt everything, even yourself. No, you don't. You could not with eyebrows like yours. He seemed pleased and laughed as he said, "Ah, so you are a physiologist, eh? I have learned more here with each hour. I am so much pleasure coming to you for breakfast. Oh no, sir, you will pardon praise from an old man, but you are blessed in your wife." I would listen to him go on praising Mina for a day, so I simply nodded and stood still. She is one of God's women, fashioned by his own hand to show us men and other women that there is heaven where we can enter, and that it is light that can be seen on earth, so true, so sweet, so noble, so little an egotist, and that, let me tell you, in so much in this age, so sceptical and selfish, and you, sir, I have read the letters to poor Lucy, and some of them speak of you, so I have known you since some days from knowing others. And I have seen your true self since last night. You will give me your hand, will you not? Let us be friends for all our lives." We shook hands, and so earnestly and so kindly it made me choky. "And now," he said, "may I ask for some more help? I have a great task to do, and at the beginning it is to know. You can help me here. Can you tell me from what went before your going to Transylvania? Later on I must ask more help, and of a different kind, but first this will do." "Look here, sir," I said, "does it not concern you about the Count?" "It does," he said solemnly. "Then I am with you heart and soul, and as you go by the 10:30 train, you will not have time to read them, but I shall get a bundle of papers. You can take them with you and read them on the train." After breakfast, I saw him to the train station. When we parted, he said, "Perhaps you will come into town if I send you, and take Madam Mina with you, too." "We shall both come when you will," I said. I had gotten him the morning papers and the London papers of the previous night, and while we were talking at the carriage window, waiting for the train to start, he turned them over. His eyes suddenly seemed to catch something in one of them. The Westminster Gazette. I knew about the color, and he grew quite white. He read something intently, groaning to himself. Mein Gott, so soon, so soon!" I do not think he remembered me at that moment. Just then the whistle blew, and the train moved off. This recalled him to himself, and he leaned out of the window and waved out, calling, "Love to Madam Mina! I shall write so soon as I ever can." Dr. Seward's Diary, 26 September. Truly there's no such thing as finality. Not a week since I said finis, and yet here I am starting fresh again, and rather going on to the same record. Until this afternoon I had no cause to think of what was to be done. Renfield has become, in all intents, as sane as he ever was. He was already ahead in his fly business, and he had just started on his spider line, too, so he had not been in much trouble to me. I had a letter from Arthur, written on Sunday, and from it I gather he's been bearing up wonderfully well. Quincy Morris is with him, and that much is of a help, for he himself is a bubbling well of good spirits. Quincy wrote me a line, too, and from him I could hear that Arthur is beginning to recover some of his old buoyancy. So as to them, all my mind is rest. As for myself, I will settle down in my work with the enthusiasm which I used to have for it, so that I might fairly have said that the wound which poor Lucy left on me may become cauterized. Everything is, however, now reopened, and what is to be, the God only knows the end. I have had an idea that Dr. Van Helsing thinks he knows too, but he will only let out enough by a time to whet curiosity. He went to Exeter yesterday and stayed there all night. Today he came back and almost bounded into the room at about 5:30 and thrusted last night's Westminster Gazette in my hand. "What do you think of that?" he asked as he stood back, arms folded. I looked over the paper, for I really did not know what he meant, but he took it from me and pointed out a paragraph about children being decoyed away at Hampstead. It did not convey much to me until I read the passage which describes small puncture wounds on their throats. An idea struck me, and I looked up. "Well," he said. "It's just like poor Lucy's." "And what do you make of it?" "Simply that there must be some common cause. Whatever it be that injury has made them, whatever made that injury injured her has injured them." I did not quite understand his answer. It is true, indirectly, but not directly." "How do you mean, Professor?" I asked. I was a little inclined to take his seriousness lightly, for, after all, 4 days of rest and freedom from burning, harrowing anxiety does not help to restore one's spirits, but when I saw his face, it sobered me. Never, even in the midst of our despair about poor Lucy, had he looked more stern. "Tell me," I said. "I can hazard no opinion. I do not know what to think, and I have no data on which to found any conjecture." "Do you mean to tell me, friend Jean, that you have no suspicion as to what poor Lucy died of? Not after all the hints given, not all by the events, but by me?" "Of nervous prostration, followed by a great loss and waste of blood." "And how the blood lost or waste?" I shook my head. He stepped over and sat down beside me and went on. You are a clever man, friend John. You reason well, and your wit is bold, but you are too prejudiced. You do not let your eyes see, nor your ears hear, and that which is outside your daily life is not of account to you. Do you not think that there are things which you cannot understand, and yet which are? That some people see things that others cannot. But there are things old and new which must not be contemplated by men's eyes, because they know, or think they know, of such things which other men have told them. It is the fault of our science, that which wants to explain all, and if it is not explained, then there is nothing to explain. But yet we see around us every day the growth of new beliefs, which we think are themselves new, which are yet but the old, which are pretending to be young, like the fine ladies of the opera. I suppose you do not believe in corporeal transference? No? Nor in materialization? Aye? Nor in astral bodies? No? Or nor in reading of thoughts? Nor in hypnotism? Yes, I said. Caltrops has proven that very well. He smiled as he went on. Then you are satisfied as of it, yes? Then of course you have understand how it acts, and he can follow the mind of the great Charlotte, alas, as he is no more, to the very soul of the patient he influenced, no? Then, friend John, am I to take it that you simply accept a fact and are satisfied to let the premise to conclusion of a blank? No? Then tell me, for I am a student of the brain, how you accept the hypnotism and reject the thought reading. Let me tell you, my friend, that there are things done today in electrical sciences which would have been deemed unholy by the very men who discovered electricity, who would have thought themselves not so long before had been burned by as wizards. There are always mysteries in life. Why was it that Methuselah lived 900 years, while old Parr 169, and yet poor Lucy, with 4 men's blood in her veins, could not live even 1 day? For had she lived 1 more day, we could have saved her. Do you know all the mysteries of life and death? Do you know that the altogether comparative autonomy, and say that wherever the quantities of brutes are in some men and some are not? Can you tell me why, when other spiders die small and soon, that one great spider lived for centuries in the tower of the old Spanish church and grew until, on descending, he could drink the oil from all the church lamps? Can you tell me why in the pampas, and everywhere, there have been bats that come out and open the veins of cattle and horses and suck their veins dry? How in some islands in the Western Sea there have been bats who hang in trees all day, and those who have seen described like giant nuts and paws, and when sailors sleep on the deck because it is hot, fit down on them, and then, in the morning, are found dead men, white as even Lucifer's. Good God, Professor, I said, staring out. Do you mean to tell me that Lucy was bitten by such a bat, and that such a thing is here in London in the 19th century? He waved his hand in silence and went on. Can you tell me why the tortoise lives more than long generations of men? Why elephants go on and on till he has dynasties, and why the parrot never die only a bite of cat or dog or other complaint? Can you tell me why men believe in all ages and places that there are some few who live on as if they have permit, and that men and women who cannot die? We all know, because science has vouched for the fact, that there have been toads shut up in rocks for thousands of years, shut in one so small hole that could only hold him since the youth of the world. Can you tell me how the Indian fakir could make himself die and have been buried, and his grave sealed, and corn sown upon it, and the corn reaped and be cut down and sown and reaped again and cut again, and then the men come and take away the unbroken seal, and there lie the Indian fakir, not dead, but that rise up and walk among them before? Here I interrupted him. I was getting bewildered. He so crowded on my mind that his list of nature's eccentricities, and possible impossibilities to my mind was getting fired up. I had a dim idea that he was teaching me some lesson, as long ago as he used to do with that study at Amsterdam. But he used then to tell me the one thing that I could have had the object of thought in my mind all the times. But now I was without this help, and yet I wanted to follow him. So I said, Professor, let me be your pet student again. Tell me your thesis, so that I may apply your knowledge as you go on. At present I am going in my mind from point to point as a madman, and not a sane one follows the idea. I feel like a novice lumbering through a bog in the mists, jumping from one tussock to another in a mere blind effort to move on without knowledge of where I'm going. That is a good image, he said. I shall tell you, my thesis is this. I want you to believe me. To believe what? To believe that there are things that you cannot. Let me illustrate. I heard once of an American who so defined faith, that faculty which enabled us to believe things that we know to be untrue. For one, I followed that man. He meant that we shall have an open mind and not let a little bit of truth check the rush of a bigger truth, like a small rock does on a railway track. We get the small truth first. Good. We keep him and we value him, but all the same, we must not let him think himself all the truth in the universe. Then you want me not to allow some previous conjecture intervene, reciprocating in my mind with some regard to some sensitive matter. Do I read your lesson right? Ah, you are my favorite pupil still. It's worth teaching you. Now that you are willing to understand, let us take the first step to understanding. You think that those small bites on the child's throats were made by the same thing that made the hole on Miss Lucy. I suppose. He stood up solemnly and said, then you are wrong. Now, would it be so? But alas, it is worse. Far, far worse. In God's name, Professor Van Helsing, what do you mean? I cried. He threw himself in a despairing gesture on the chair and placed his elbows on the table, covering his face with his hands as he spoke. They were made by Miss Lucy.